All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, and today we are joined by I I don't think he's maybe like one of the unsung whitetail killers anymore, but this is a guy that you used to hear about a lot, like Johnny Stewart. Johnny Stewart, the guy knows everything, especially if you talk to Bill Thompson. I feel like you're a
Yeah.
god in his eyes. Um, uh, but Mr. Johnny Stewart, one of the nicest, most humble deer hunters out there, but the dude is a absolute killer. So happy to have you on here, Johnny. How you doing today?
Good. And thanks for saying that, Adam. I'm doing well. Kind of home for a little stretch here and just kind of starting to think about some late season December into January stuff. It's an addiction that doesn't really end with me. And even when I get home and there's stuff to do around the house, I can't help but like my addiction makes me somehow get in the woods. Like yesterday, I was like, oh, I got this spot kind of pretty close to home. I can go just spend a couple hours in there. And then my fiance go, you gonna make it home for dinner? Yeah, I think I'll be home. So it's like I can't get rid of it, you know.
So how like let's talk about your season. Like when did your season start and kind of how is it shaped up? It sounds like it's still going on. So
Yeah, the season never ends, but springtime scouting kind of prep for um the fall. But I put a lot of time in this summer trying to um find a spot for an early season October kill. Basically maybe a summer into fall feeding, whether it's a mast crop, um, or like some clear cuts in PA that I focus on. But most of these areas were even close to the roads, and that was kind of my goal going into the fall. And I didn't really plan much for the rut, which I was a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Um, So that was my goal going into the season. A lot of summer scouting, just prepping for actually the initial 8-10 days into October because I feel like you could still catch them um, on somewhat of a summer pattern. Getting to bed a little later or getting out a little earlier in the evening and maybe not so much hunting pressure. So
so
that's
what
how
did
it
you have
started.
what did you have for tags though? I mean like so like as far as like your first hunt versus like today.
So I had Ohio for sure, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. I was focused on these three states, and all of them were pre-scouted in the spring. Um, m- Mainly cameras through the summer in Pennsylvania. Some of the areas in Ohio and West Virginia were higher elevation, were not many deer. I was just kind of banking on the mast crop. Um, so those cameras were kind of set up summer into fall to see if they were going to feed on those areas. So them were the three states I wanted to focus on getting into the season, and want the place in West Virginia was a really rugged area, and I found a man an isolated little ridge line away from the larger mountain that had definitely, man, no one on it. And all it needed to do was produce acorns. So I felt like we could have killed there. And so we made a few trips there. The first uh, day of West Virginia, 27th, 28th, I think, of September. And we went up there on this mountain in an area that doesn't have a lot of deer. And we jumped like 8-10 does, checked two cameras, like a 120 class or so, but I felt like something bigger would be there. So we came back, like went to PA. Then we come back a week or so later, thinking maybe a bigger buck would move in there, and still made those trips down there, and nothing that I wanted to shoot was in there. And we made one more trip on October 28th, and I had a camera on a large scrape, and I mean, it takes us over an hour to get to that spot hiking. And man, I walked up at him to the scrape October 28th, and it was just filled with sticks and leaves. I'm just like, oh, my heart, I was like, this was it. This was the spot. It was a leeward side and a lot of, but what happened was the oaks was a just a brief, you know, 2 week window with some black oaks. And once they were dried up, they kind of disappeared. So our 3 trips down to West Virginia, like 2 or 3 day trips, we didn't the first time we got in a tree just because it was the first day, but we really didn't hunt. It was like we pulled our stuff and we didn't spend time looking for a new area. I was really banking on that spot, and all it needs is acorns. And I thought, with the black oaks that were falling early, I thought they'd at least be hanging around into maybe later October, but they dried up, and the deer, it was like a ghost town, and it's so vast down there. So, man, I thought, and I really wanted to kill one way up on that rugged mountainside, and then we end up spending some time in Ohio. Um, we gave up on PA because my first, all my clear cuts that I was banking on, hopefully maybe early morning, catch them retreating back down into the mature forest, kind of the vast area away from the roads or gated roads. It was like, I don't know if guys were in there or what, but it was like mid to end of September. They left their summer like pattern, and they weren't hardly in those cuts. I checked all my cameras, and it was like, and I was just like, we didn't even, I think, hunt the first, which was the 5th of October, in PA, because they were they weren't even at nighttime in these cuts. It was so weird. I think maybe I'm always scratching my head and wondering, but I think maybe it was other guys doing the same thing. I feel like it's a trend where I talk about it or people talk about being near the roads, not going way back, and it goes that route. And I see cell cams in them cuts, and I know the area, so I wasn't putting a lot of human scent in there. I had the cameras running through the summer. I'd check them maybe one time midday when it was hot in the summer, and then again pull them before the season, and they just disappeared. And so we barely hunted Pennsylvania. It was like all my time I put in near these cuts trying to, and they were all near roads. I didn't, because I feel like, man, I could hit so many more spots at them near the roads instead of going back, way back to check one cut. Um, but I'm trying, I guess if I lived there and had more time, I'd probably have cameras way back and have a better chance. But it's like I'm trying to hunt, 4 or 5 different states. So I'm kind of like get as much intel when I'm there as I can for like a 2 day scouting trip. So I'm putting by the roads, but maybe next year will be finding that cut that's off the beaten trail and catching a buck living there. But then you're putting all your eggs in one basket. You know what I mean? I'm always writing in my journal on Spartan Forge so I can look back and, I write little notes in there to say, hey, they disappeared. But I thought that was really, so banking on that West Virginia spot, um, and the Pennsylvania, I said, man, I'd scouted all summer, put these, or had my cameras running all summer and banking on these spots near the road. And they just like, yeah, first day we didn't barely hunt. So a lot of things went south. And like I said, other times I say before the season, you don't know how it's going to pan out. And my other spot in West Virginia, um, which wasn't a far as a drive that I've shot deer in. I don't know if they had an EHD problem or what. And that was a great early season spot. There was no deer there, no rubs. Like I left my camera for 10 days and I picked up like a few doe and one buck, which in years past there was a lot of deer on it. So all my spots were like not good. It's weird. Like you think, yeah, you know everything and you've been everywhere and you can't really predict the future, even though you know a lot about the animals. Things change drastically year to year, whether it's pressure, food, cover, whatever it may be. And it seems like every year you're going in with a no matter how, and I try to prepare more and do more and do more, but it doesn't matter. You can't predict what nature's going to do and how it's going to turn out. So yeah, my two West Virginia spots were a no-go, and PA was like a no-go. I said, man, I'll have to get in here later in October. And so we spent time in Ohio and had a couple areas with mast crop, and it was some rugged area, but man, there was two bucks we had within, well, one was within 40 and one was within 20, and I should have had one of those bucks. So we had luck there at the end of October. Um, yeah, and then from there we went to PA for the rut and stuff like that. But yeah, it never goes as planned. So
So one of the things that I find interesting with guys like yourself, and it kind of goes back and forth. One of the things that I struggle with, and I say it all the time, and I find it really difficult to do. I think I did it a little bit better this year in the early season. Is is hunting? I feel like I hunt better out of state because I'm trying to be like in the moment instead of like
yes,
going off of historical stuff. And so for a guy like yourself, and a lot of the things that you outlined kind of like play to that. In like some of these areas you'd scouted a bunch that was your home turf, to so to speak, you knew, or you thought you knew what the deer were going to do. And like when you talked about walking in there on that scrape and it's all covered in sticks and everything, like how disheartening that is
yeah,
when you're going into that. And so like in state, I feel like we have so many things, like you were talking about, like your fiance, like saying, hey, you're going to be home, like things pulling you where you feel like, oh, I know I should be here, but I'm going to go here because, I think, or usually, or whatever. But
yeah.
you have a spot like I think it must have been last year that Bill filmed you shooting a buck in, that you put up on your YouTube, which I'm really glad that you have that now, because it's great to,
Yeah.
to see that. But I think that was the same tree, and I think you talked about it in the video, where like it was like one of your buddies killed and Greg killed and you killed like three deer out of the same tree. Like, how do you balance with all of your scouting the spots that you like know or that should be good, and that going out and finding, like, the quote unquote annoying podcast hot sign type thing?
I what's tough for me is that I mean, being that I have a cameraman, I feel like I do it all the time. It's like I got to be hunting because we're not, and I got to tell myself, if there's not that meat on a bone, you need to keep scouting. But there's always that other guy on my shoulder. Is like it could happen anytime. So I I end up hunting more because and with a camera guy than I probably should. I probably should be hiking and finding that fresh sign, um, because uh, you know uh, that's what you need to be on, and historically might be different from this year, as I said. And so yeah, I like out of state or new areas, or just for example, Pete, my camera guy, he had a few days to hunt in Kansas, like after PA. I said, go hunt 5 days and I'll see you in North Dakota. And he went and found the hottest sign, bumped deer, this and that. He ended up killing a nice buck. So, and I look at that, I'm like, we need to be doing more of that. Um, and as I look back on this season, it's like, why am I putting all these cameras out? Why am I doing this? It's like, just keep hiking and find the fresh sign and go for it. I feel like all that trying to predict what's going to happen, and where you're going to be, um, doesn't always pan out. It's you need to be where they are and what they want to be doing. So it's a struggle for me because having someone follow me around, and sometimes it's a matter of getting it. I did it last year, got in a tree, and I said to myself, with the cameraman, but it takes him 15 minutes to set his gear up, and I said, this ain't the spot. Like, I know this ain't, but we sat there anyways because I'm not. He's probably like, yeah, here we go. So I kind of feel for them, and even think about them when they're following me around. I'm like, I'm just like, let's just hunt here. So that's a struggle I have just because I'm taking someone else's time and I need to be in a tree hunting to kill a deer, but it's better if we do the walking and scouting and get to where that fresh sign is and then less hunting. So I struggle with it every year. Just and then some parts of me, Adam, I just love hunting. Just it's not always about killing. I just want to get in a tree, I say to myself, and it's not always maybe the best spot, and just being in a tree and hunting. I like to hunt. So, and then once you tag, you're done hunting. Like I shot my deer last week in PA, and I'm like, it was snow falling. I was like, man, I just don't want to get back out and hunt. So, it is it's a struggle, and I got to do better with my in-season scouting. I think I did better in the past because it was just me, and I wasn't didn't taking up someone else's time. Um, Whether they go with me or stay at the hotel and they're just sitting there until I find. So my hunts were based more off of like historical signs. So we would just go in and hunt, but I don't think it was always the best scenario.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last year, uh, for all intents and purposes, I basically hunted Kansas by myself. And when I went down to Tennessee this year, I was hunting with my buddy, and we were kind of having a conversation. Of he was like, "I would hate that." Like, and I said it was very like freeing because I didn't have to like we didn't have to find two spots. We didn't have to park here. And if I wanted to make a change, I I could change. So for you, like historically, had you like in all the years past, were you more of like a hunt by yourself guy and kind of have a hunting camp here and there, or how did it play out?
Yeah, did everything myself, and then that's where, I mean, I do well now, but all the hiking, and I always said I know a lot now because wanted to see what was over the next ridge, and I would go whether it was bumping deer or not, but the knowing is what I always liked. Um, but yeah, I always pretty much I like hunting myself because I think when you go with someone else on out of state or whatever, they might not be as extreme as me. It's like, hey, it's 9 o'clock at night. I'm gonna go check cameras, and if you got I always want to have my vehicle. I want to be able to do what I want to do to fuel my addiction. So, um, yeah, like, and hunting camp would always be more like everybody has their own vehicle, and this is where we're staying, and you go your way, I'll go mine. We rarely go together. And like I said, being that now the cameraman goes with me, so I have another person, and I don't do what I need to do just because I got someone else's time, and I don't do the extreme stuff, and I hunt more and scout less when I always preached about scout more, hunt less, just because I got someone else with me. But I've done all right. I just something I need to work on.
And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about was with, because it sounds like you're putting a lot of cameras out and, now we have, the tools like Spartan Forge and, like the first iterations of Onyx, like changed the whole landscape for like all the hunting community, like podcasts. And, you say like, well, I talk about it. And then you start to see more guys doing this and this and this. Like, what do you think are some of the best things that maybe have gone by the wayside because of these how has your scouting changed now being able to use cell cams or trail cameras in general and the mapping?
Well, one way it hasn't changed is boots on the ground. You can only do so much with a map. Um, I feel like I have way more spots now. Not, I don't know if that's always a good thing, but that definitely changed because I'm able to drop pins where there's a scrape, take a picture, write a note, and I can keep going through the forest. Where in the past, I, I would just dissect an area and just kind of know where the rub and or the scrape is. Now I can go back to a place I haven't been in 3 years and have a pin for that rub and scrape or whatever it may be, or trail or deer I saw. So I think we're able to scout a lot more areas, get a lot more intel, and like I guess be able to go back to that intel easily because you could, like I said in the past, I couldn't scout all the areas now and know where all the rubs and scrapes are. So, and with like cell cams, I really hate them. I have one cell cam. It's out there. I put it yesterday and it's not working. And I don't like the cell cams because I think people are getting that much more intel. They only have to climb up that mountain one time. Where in the past I would go up to put it out, up to check it, watch my scent, do it at night. I just feel like I don't want to say lazy hunters, maybe hunters that I don't know how to put it, Adam. People are getting way more intel now, basically, than in the past. A lot. It's not as tough. Um, I'd say just yeah, that's it. You can get so much more intel with less effort, and then when you get that intel, dropping pins, you can just keep going scout everywhere, and you can go 3 years and have all that intel. So, but it is what it is. You know, like I'll probably get some cell cams next year. It's not that I'd rather not have them. I'm not going to. Like I said, I do got one. Maybe I'll put a few out next year. It's just the way it's like when they had the horse and buggy and a car come out. It's like, hey, that's it. No, I'm just using my horse and buggy. Well, everybody's going to eventually. You're going to get a car. That's how it's going. Technology's taking over, and you either get left behind or you get on board with it. So,
So in your hunting style and over the years, like how do you use the trail camera data? Because I feel like a lot of guys, and I find myself doing it sometimes with like a cell cam, is you're like chasing a picture, but you're always a few days behind. And instead of like trying to analyze the pictures that you have and see what the deer was doing at the time, you're saying, well, he's there now or he was there yesterday. Um, and I think a lot of people don't, um, I guess, like process the information. They just think of it as like real time information. And even though it's a day, unless you're running out there right now, it's still a day late and that deer could be 5 miles away. So for you, as you're getting even like the SD camera intel, like how are you utilizing it throughout the season?
well, the biggest thing is the daytime pictures, what we want to see, whether it's feeding early season, scrape hunting. Hey, he's moving during the day, like the chances are the pressure's not that great here, and looking at the, where he could be coming from. I'm using it that way. That's why I want to see a daylight picture. I mean, I use it for intel, and then a lot of it anymore is just hunting, knowing, using the app and knowing where the scrapes are, where the terrain features or cover, or where it might be, and just being in the area, basically. Not, hey, he's right here at this tree. I'm going to sit at this tree, like you said. That's can be he could be far from there. But if it's a midday deal or something, and say he's in the area, so not specifically um, that spot. Um, and I've been pulling a lot of my cameras into October. Um, like I leave some, but it's like I got the intel. Here's where the mast is. There's where they're bedding. I'll leave one or two, but I just start hunting just because I like to hunt. And we did good in Ohio. We did well. I mean, we had 2 bucks we could have shot, should have shot, but and that was an out of state thing. I just knew where the mast was and knew where the cover was, and we just got set up accordingly. I didn't need the cameras. I just had intel of the deer were there, and I just went to the maps and you know the woodsmanship of knowing, leeward side or some thick a cut, getting within, just staying like that's early season, staying within 150 yards. I mean, there's an instance we checked a camera because had a deer come out of the cut, come right by us. We couldn't get a shot and left a camera there. We come back like a week later. We didn't have them and um, checked another camera just for intel. And it was a south slope. It was 75 degrees. There wasn't much cover nearby. It was mast, a scrape. I said, we're never going to catch a deer here. It was like October 18th or 15th. I don't even know what, 12th. And so it was weird, but I told Pete, I said, I got a spot about a mile through the woods and it was crunchy, like a dead calm. He probably thought I was crazy, but I'm like, we need to be tight to some cover. And we went like a mile to another drain and we got on like the one hillside. He was in like a bowl and we were across the ridge and we snuck out to the point and we got set up and he was there. I said, and I haven't hunted that spot in 2 years. I said, there was a big one living here 2 years ago. He's probably still here. It's so hard to get to. And before dark, he was below us. Didn't see him, but we got up at dark and started walking and he snorted. It was a big deer, you know what I mean? But I think um, just mainly intel that the deer are there, then go to your maps and know where the pressure is and where the cover is, where the food is, and knowing that these mature deer, before the rut, you got to be within 150 yards of their bed, and then as the rut, they're going to be out later in the morning and return, a little bit later in the morning or wherever it might be, something like that. But I think man, because I want to hunt so much that like even up in the rut, like um I just hunted, man. I know the land, like use my woodsmanship and the knowledge of the area, and we just hunted. There was like a couple cameras I would run. It was kind of an area near the road, but there was a huge scrape there, and you get into the rut, anything could happen. We left. I would check a few here and there, but I think I would just get out in the woods and hunt, you know. So
And so when you're saying that you just want to get out there, you just want to hunt, and and maybe we can even walk it back to like before you had a cameraman, right? So that you were kind of more free to kind of like do what Johnny wanted to do without having to worry about anybody else. Um, are you like a guy that wants to get out there? And because there are guys that want to that think specifically they need to be out there an hour before daylight and fully set up and to their spot. Or are you a guy that's like, I'm gonna go in and when I find something that looks good, that validates kind of like everything that I was thinking, I'm gonna get up a tree and it doesn't matter the time frame or whatever.
I think it's situational or time of year. I think that you can get in before. There's instances where I would get in before, maybe an hour before light and get set up, maybe catch them returning to a bedding area. Um, or just like getting into an area, you know, where I think maybe they'd be whatever it might be, feeding or something where I would otherwise spook them in the daylight. But I think there's also instances where like maybe during a rut, I think your best time for a big deer is 10 to 2. So sometimes I feel like that dead calm, heavy frost first hour and a half. I believe like the scent, it's so like your floaters will drop straight to the ground. Like for a bigger deer, I mean, how's he going to smell it? a doe unless he's right on her. I feel like when the sun comes up, the wind blows, scent starts moving around. I feel like that's the best time. So, um, yeah, just as long as you can get in quietly. So I feel like that's when these bucks move in the middle of the day. Like, so during a rut, to me, you get out there, I mean, 8:30, 9, not saying that's always the case. I mean, this year in North Dakota, we got in a tree before light. Um, but we only had a short window to hunt there and it, but there's other times when, hey, you just get out there. And I feel like sometimes you can get burned out too, where you do that every day, maybe you got an hour drive, an hour hike in the woods, and you're getting out there before light. You're only going to be able to do that in a few days. You're going to be burned out. So it's like, um, let's just get in there at 10, as long as maybe sometimes you need a frost to burn off to get into that area and hunt that midday. I think it's all depending on the situation, just where the deer are and what they're doing and maybe where they're bedding. Then you can decide what time to get out there. But man, I know the 10 to 2 hours, in the rut is the best time. So,
And so in that, because I I can't think of like any time that I've done like an all day sit where and it's like one of those things where it's like you're in the right area, like there are days that you're on it and the deer are chasing and running around, and I've witnessed that, but I don't think I've ever like really had like a good 10 to 2 experience really. Um, so when you're setting up like that on the rut, like what are some of your favorite areas or terrain features? Like where are you setting up during that time of year and having those encounters?
uh, I think maybe it depends on the situation, but I think maybe closer to where some does are, where he can maybe cut a track of a doe, maybe a scrape. I think it depends on the situation, but probably where does had been the night before, going into their beds and around those areas. I like a high pressured day, and the sun kind of comes through the woods and creates like a lot of shade and sun. I feel like they feel like they're camouflaged pretty good. That, you know, just the darks and lights. It's hard to see in the woods. A day like that, but yeah, checking where those have been, whether it's feeding some acorns. Um, you're not always sure where he's coming from, but you kind of know where he wants to be because he's going to be looking for a doe, near a bedding area, feeding area. I think that's your number one place to start looking. But that high pressure day, man, I love those days.
It's crazy like how you explained that because like I can see that day in the woods. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like where I feel like you're describing a day that's like early enough so that there's still foliage up or you're in some thick stuff. And then, where you just catch that glimpse and then all of a sudden there's a deer there that, and you're just like, oh my gosh. Like, but I'm glad that you didn't just say like downwind of bedding or something like that. Cause that's, you know, the,
yeah, and you're
that's where you,
downwind of a lot of stuff too. But yeah,
yeah. Yeah. No, so in the, what, a lot of your stuff is done like in the mountains or like in hill country, and you said a lot of like leeward type stuff. As you're getting into the late season, does that change? Are you moving towards more sunny areas or feeding area? Like, what's your strategy now going into this late season?
so and one thing I struggle with now is, as people, like, I think about it, is the more you know, the more you find out you don't know. So like I'm kind of like in there to where I keep learning and I keep seeing more at them. So the problem I'm having is I've seen it all. like the deer I shot the other day, you know, he was leeward, like down in the bottom, but there was a blowdown. He was on the wrong side of it, like all the stuff you hear, or just so. What's weird is I don't like with Pete, my cameraman. I consult with him because he knows a lot about hunting. He's a young guy, but he knows it's like he skimmed off the top all the, and he took the creme de la creme. He knows where, but me, I've seen it all. I've seen all this stuff, and I get in an area, and it's good to talk with him or like Bo or people. Just say, hey, just what do you think? Oh, okay, because I've seen deer move at weird times with the wind at their back or to the side or bed, and it's like and so it's hard for me to say what they do because I've seen everything. But even with like leeward side and south slopes, I know a lot of times in PA the big deer will be on the north slopes, be snow up to their knees. Why? In the south slope, he's not there. I don't know. I think they like dark areas, them big mature deer, hemlocks, pines, thermal cover. They don't care about the snow. I feel like the snow starts hindering them around maybe 2 foot. Other than that, they're going to be, I feel like, on their own somewhat. But late season, I would just want that. It's the weather's the thing I'm starting to watch every day in a few different states and waiting for the temperature to drop, you know, 8, 10 degrees. And I want to get out there like before it's dropping, or if a storm is moving in, I want to be before and during the storms when they're going to be moving. I think that's the biggest thing I focus on is the weather. Um, so yeah, that's number one. Or if the weather stays cold for, you need 5 days, 5 to 7 days of cold weather, then they can't just feed at night. They need to feed it in daytime. They need to move to stay warm and feed. So if you got a good area for them to be feeding on, um, there's a good chance you can catch deer moving. And it's the same. I feel, I also feel like the mid morning, I'll hunt like I'll get out there at like 8 or 9 and I'll set all day because chances are they need to get up and feed at some point 10 to 2, 10, 8, 9, like 9, 9 o'clock, the 10, 12, or maybe before dark. But the number one thing is the weather, and we haven't had a lot of cold weather, whether it's snow or just really cold weather. So if I see a really cold spell, I'm going to get into areas that I know they're going to be feeding in. But slopes, it's not always. I've seen them on south and north, so I don't really take that in consideration. Maybe if it's the snow's starting to melt, it might melt faster on that south slope. I might um, be an area, um, just anywhere out of the wind too. Don't have to be leeward, but leeward's out of the wind, or if you got some thermal covers, and you can find just a little area out of the wind on maybe just a drain. It don't have to be a whole leeward side. It might be just a small point. It creates a little drain where there might be a flat spot he could lay. I mean, they could lay by a log and stay out of the wind or a rock. Um, just anything like that. They're pretty good at creating their little pieces of habitat, out in where we might miss stuff where they're really feeling it, and they're efficient and they'll take advantage of every little nook and cranny in there. If it's an area close to where they're feeding that you think, oh, it's wide open on that hillside, you got some big dead logs or just big trees or some irregular ground. That's all they need to get in and get out of the wind and stuff like that.
So when you're going in there and you had mentioned like big deer with the thermal cover or the dark, the shaded it, just where they can't be seen or whatever. Um, are you looking for these? Are these deer still like a solo deer? Because I think a lot of people around here and like when the snow comes, you can see where there's just where the deer are because of all of the tracks. Are you looking for like just like one solo big track? in an area, or like how are you utilizing the snow like to help you? Like these deer are singular still?
Yeah, the bigger ones will be, you get I mean, you could just see the big holes in the gates wider, but I mean, not saying one with a little bit smaller track doesn't have a big rack, but the older deer will still tend to be by themselves, um, unless they're with another old deer. They do that. And I mean, I've also seen them with a small buck in tow, um, but mainly not with the does and fawns, yearlings, but that maybe at night, because they might still be checking on the herd. They're just like a satellite, they're there watching the whole time, from a distance or whatever, and they know they'll go in and check stuff like that. But um, yeah, usually by themselves. But I just found three big buck, and it's weird. I've done it like you think they're by themselves, and then you'll find buck tracks on top of buck tracks, and you're like, hey, there's two or three bucks. They'll get, into January, or even now they might just utilize each other for safety, like as the does and fawns, like two or three bedded in areas way better, but it's going to be someone. I mean, he might pick up a small buck and use him as a decoy, or like two big bucks bedded. I've seen them get ganged up in around gun season, or I've seen it many times. Um, yeah, I just think of maybe their temperament, maybe, or how hard the hunting pressure is to where like, hey, we need to stick together and get through this, or just a loner buck, that like an old buck I know of. We found his bed there last week, and where it was is being typical, beyond a blowdown, way down the lowest elevation, and we think he's 10 years old, and it's just like he's by himself, but it's all. I've seen a lot of different variations with that. Just you just got to get out there and kind of like a story. That's why I like tracking and looking in the snow. There's a story being told, um, and that's what's so fascinating to me, is trying to figure out what the story is, and learn what their plan of attack is, or what they're thinking when they're walking, and like kind of get in their brain, and see what they're doing, or where they're looking, or where they're feeding, and they go somewhere. Why are they doing that? And sometimes there's not an answer, but sometimes it's like, oh, this is what he did. But it was pretty cool last week. I think it was like 1 week ago. We didn't have much snow where we were gun hunting, and it was like an inch of snow on top of frozen ground, and it was my areas I usually hunt, and there was no wind. We couldn't get around, and like 45 minutes north, they had 5 inches of snow, and we just picked a spot on a map, dropped a pin, some rugged hillside, and I said, let's park and go up there, and it was pretty wild at them. We were walking up the hill. Um, I think it was kind of a south slope, but near a point, and I said, let's stay near the point. I said, the top's flat. I said, we're going to be maybe at, 2/3 of the way up, where we'll probably start seeing deer sign. And we were walking up the hill, and just so happened the wind was blowing up the hill, and the snowflakes were going up. And we got up to a transition, everything like you want to look for, just elevation transition, not on the top of the mountain, but down where you can't see it from the top, like near a point, like uh, there was a buck actually rubbing a tree while we were maybe 100 yards from him. He was just above that little transition in elevation, not much, just kind of like this. He was right there walking along the hillside, but he must have smelled us, and it was wild. We come up, and you could see how he was rubbing a tree, and he smelled us, and he ran back away from the point. It was pretty wild. I was like, man, there was a buck rubbing. This was an area we never been to. I was like, he was here rubbing his tree. And I said, you know what? The wind's blowing up the hill. I said, he's probably gonna, and I thought about it this morning. I said, he's probably gonna go a couple 100 yards, 100-foot elevation up, and come across again, because that's where he wants to be. And we stood there, talked about it, like, look, wow, check this out, videoed it and stuff like that. But we should have just kept going up the hillside, because we talked about it for about 15 minutes, and that allowed him to run up and come across. So by the time we started walking up, we caught his tracks. It was thick in there. It wasn't visibility wasn't that great. He had saw us, so um, but he did what I thought, which was pretty wild. I said he's going this way, out toward that point, you know. Maybe he wants to get on that leeward side because the wind was hitting that hillside and coming up that hillside. But if we like, I look back and we should have just kept running up the hill, 150-foot elevation, and just posted. We probably would have caught him coming along there trying to smell us again. Um, but I was like awestruck. I was like, that's pretty wild. This buck was here rubbing a tree. And so after the second time we bumped him, he run across the flat 500 yards and he did a J hook out. There was another big bowl. He did a J hook right before the bowl as he went out toward, we thought, oh, he's going down in that bowl. And he did a little J hook and it was flat with a little, maybe 5 foot elevation change. And so he run out on the flat and he come back on that little bit lower elevation change, like 80 yards from where he went across the flat. He was 80 yards below. So he was sitting there, and by then, he said, I'm going to watch my back trail. That's what he did. We went out and we found you bet and he watched us come, but you would have never seen him. It was probably just his eyes and his rack in a bunch of trees. And he was just sitting there watching his trail. You know what I mean? That was pretty wild. And then we followed him maybe 800 yards after that. He got down into another drain with another big deer. But it was getting dark and we headed out. But I like getting out in the snow and just following them and seeing what they do and stuff like that. That's pretty awesome.
So for you, and I mean, I can see like in your body language and your tone, like how cool that was for you. So things like that versus like having a big deer on camera and then killing that deer, where some guys have like deer picked out that's like, oh, I'm only going to shoot this one. Or like for you going in somewhere blind and having it work out exactly the way that you thought it did or was going to. Like which one of those, as like Johnny Stewart the hunter, like the guy that loves to hunt, that loves to do this, is like more fulfilling for you?
I think probably tracking a deer in the snow because I don't get much snow. Like, um, that's something that's just for me is like unreal. Like to see their every move and where they're going, you got to learn so much. But because I don't get the snow, and like I said, where we were, we had the first day was good, and we had inch and a half of snow, and we couldn't even walk. So to be able to, whether we got the deer or not, I just needed to do that because it's rare for me. I've shot deer like I've had on camera or sheds and stuff like that. So that was, man, I just really enjoy that tracking them and stuff like that. And I'm not the best tracker by no means. There's guys that are, man, this is what they do. And so that's something I like to get better at. But yeah, that's pretty awesome, to get out in the snow and see their every move. So
So I got a question for you. We talked a little bit about it before the podcast. I was going to bring it up, but like, so for us here, like we're like strictly bow hunting, right? Like we just bow hunt, bow hunt, bow hunt. And I feel like on some level, like, cause I was just out with my daughter and, she's hunting with a rifle cause she's 9 and
yeah,
getting out there and, spending time. And like, I don't want to say that it's like, I guess like shooting does and everything. I feel like much easier with the rifle. Like, I don't think there's any way, shape or form. I think big bucks and all of that, like it's still difficult and there's an art to it. But do you think, like, how do you view gun hunting versus bow hunting? Like for me, I feel I'm starting to feel like here after doing this podcast for like the last 6 years and just strictly bow hunting, like maybe I'm like missing out on opportunities that like opportunities to track deer and
yeah,
chances and things like that. And then I think some of the people who maybe haven't killed a whole lot of deer, but are still just trying to just stick to strictly bow hunting are kind of like, really missing out on hunting opportunities and opportunities to be on the woods. So how do you feel like how do you like rate the two as far as like experience and more so like maybe like learning experiences?
Well, I think with the gun, I get a gun in my hands, and with a bow, I like to I like to be in a tree and like beat them up in a tree and being stationary and picking that spot, not moving. I rarely hunt on the ground with a bow. I think the to me the challenge is beating their eyes, their nose, and when you're up in that tree and you can't move and you overcome those odds when you're on the ground, whether it's stalking or just being on the ground, you have the ability to move and get in better positions, whether the wind or whatever it may be. And so when I get a gun in my hand after I've been stationary and the bow um, woods, I I want to hunt. You know, I want to go after them and be a hunter. Like a predator that's actually stalking um, or steel hunting. Which um, I mean, I'm not crazy about driving deer. I mean, we do it, and it's not my go-to. Hey, gun season here, let's drive deer. I want to get a gun and I want to steel hunt through the woods, see where they're at, just stalk, maybe see one, put a stalk on them, but mainly steel hunt I feel like that's how we used to hunt. I mean, it's going back forever, like stalking your animal, you know what I mean? Or steel hunting. So, um, yeah, and I try to get into areas that don't have a lot of people. I know a lot of people won't, like the thing in the past was when we were growing up, my buddies, let's go. There's a lot of guys here. They'll move deer. They'll be, I don't like that. I don't want pressured deer. I want deer that are unpressured. And I want to and it don't matter like where I go up and down 5 mountains or whatever it is. I just want to be one on one with that animal and try to stalk them or still hunt them. So I think it's just a different type of hunting that, as far as learning much, I mean, you're still utilizing what you know about deer and where they bed, leeward sides, point. You're still utilizing all that stuff. But now you have a little more distance on your side that you don't have to be stationary in that tree, as precise. You kind of like can loosen up a little bit and be off 50 to 100 yards or 200 yards. You know, we was steel hunting the first day here, and we caught some buck feeding on the leeward side, and 200 yards. And when another thing that you look at is the weather again, and we had some decent wind with that crunchy snow. So I went to an area where I could see 150 to 200 yards, and it's just you know, knowing your area that you hunt in, and when the conditions come, like you can't get into an area where a big buck might be living in an area when you can only see, we had an inch of snow, 60 to 80 yards, but just sound of the snow and under the hemlocks, there wasn't much snow, basically frozen grounds. Like, well, you can't hunt there. It's like, so, you have to find what you can do that'll work. So we got to an area where we could see 150 to 200 yards, and there was a light wind, and it worked out. We saw a good deer, and I let Pete shoot it the first day. And but like I said, you could loosen up and get a little further away and have some range on your side. So it's like you're just kind of utilizing your maps and everything, but just look at the weather and just you can just be a little get a little more distance for your opportunity with your shot.
So do you think like I heard Kevin on the Deer Hunter podcast talk about it just recently. He was talking with Dan Infalt and he said, if you're going online and you're looking for like gun hunting content that isn't drives or anything like that, there isn't a whole lot of it. Do you think, like as an industry or something, like we're doing like a disservice, like like by like because everything seems to be bow hunting. Like I
Yeah,
mean, and maybe it's we're in a in a vacuum, and that's just what we see, and that's what they show to us. But it really seems like that we're not. I grew up. I like learned, quote unquote, learned hunting, or like got in the woods with a rifle for the most
yeah,
part. I Bow hunting was always secondary. Like it was just something that you did up until the gun season here in Michigan.
yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously that's changed for us, but I
Hmm.
feel like as an industry, it's almost changed.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Everybody's wanting to bow hunting's amazing, the close encounters, I think, but like even trying to, when you're stationary, you can get a guy to film over your shoulder and you got up close and personal content. But, with that stalking and that, like two of us are hiking through the woods and it's not, stuff happens fast, you got to, so I don't think there's that much content in that. Like there's not much as far as tracking deer because that's pretty tough to get on with another guy, and so I feel like the content is easier to get in a bow hunting, you know, stand hunting, I guess I would say, whether it is a gun or bow. It's, you know, I guess, like I said, with the steel hunting, like even we did get some video, but it wasn't like what you would get from a bow hunting situation. It's like he's on that other hill. We got a little bit of footage of the shot and stuff like that. But yeah, I think just, I don't know. I think bow hunting is more, you know, it's not about pressure. Where gun hunt can be, for the most part, pressured deer. It's not like knowing the animal and how he's maneuvering through the forest. It's more, you know, gun season is a lot of guys out, so it's not. Um, it's a different type, But and like I said, there's not much as far as guys getting out way off the beaten path and that, you know. I don't know, but I'm like you. It was gun season. That's what we started doing, and like bow hunting come afterwards. But then it just, it took over. It's like an up close and personal, I think, thing that everybody really likes about it. And I'm not a. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not a gun hunter, but I don't like the bang boom. Like I like the stealth, the bow. Like. But I'm not saying. But then with the snow we got here was like I was so I get up at 3:30 in the morning and I drive around, look for tracks, whether I'm hunting there or not. Like have my coffee and I'm out the door at 4:30 and finding tracks and marking them and gauging the snow. And that's what trackers do. And, just like people say, what state you hunt? You like hunting the most? I said, whatever state I'm in and, wherever I'm hunting, I just want to go hunting. So yeah, I'm not crazy about the gun, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So one of the things here in Michigan is like, so we're a 2 buck state, and we have like really odd like antler point restrictions, and everybody has a different opinion where it's like my tag, I can shoot whatever I want to. There should be statewide
Yeah.
APRs. It should be 1 buck. All these different things. And so in the time that you've been hunting PA, there's been changes, and now you guys are 4 on a side, right? For
In
APR.
most of the state, and then some like in a some zones they have the three on one side. Um, but for the most of the state, I think Pennsylvania, like I've been to the Midwest, and it's pretty easy. I feel not easy, but managing your herd, it's pretty much all ag, and you have towns like this and ag, so it's kind of the same or a big city. I feel like Pennsylvania, I drive around and it's hilly, there's mountainous, there's farmland, there's a lot of cities, rural areas, suburb, urban. Like I feel like it's so difficult to manage the herd when you have a lot going on and deer living in all different types of habitat. You can't just there's just not like a you just can't group it all. Like you can maybe, I think maybe Iowa would be like you got your ag, then you got your cities, maybe a little bit of rural, but it's mainly like all the same. Some ag areas have more forest, but I look at Pennsylvania and some in the past I've talked to guys, and I mean Pennsylvania is a really old state, and there's a lot of roads and a lot of people, and I think some areas are kind of farmland that have smaller patches of timber, and a lot of fields. And like just my buddy I was eating lunch with yesterday, he lives in an area that's out what you would call in the country, some farmlands, pasture, a little bit of ag, rolling hills, timber. Um, he has 80 acres. He hasn't seen a shooter buck. And he's been there in 10. I mean, he hasn't seen anything over the 125 mark in 10 years. And I know another friend of mine in the same area that if you see a 125, 130, that's you better shoot it because they can't get away. There's so many hunters. There's not enough continuous in this area, those areas, piece of timber or cover for them to hide. There's a lot of does. So these deer are traveling through 3 or 4 different properties, and that's the biggest deer. You're going to shoot the biggest deer. If it's a 115, like you're hunting your land and it's the biggest deer, you're going to harvest them. So I think if somehow, like in that area, if you didn't have a buck hunting season for a year, then you might have some 130 to 140s. So you've got a good um, group, a good like crop of deer. Then you're going to let them 120s go and you're going to focus on the 135, 140. So there's going to allow deer for the future. But like even the one guy I talked to years back, he kind of, I feel like lives in the same area that where he said there's 4 points on one side isn't good because everybody's letting the in his area, same where my buddies live, the fours and sixes and spikes are all living, and we're shooting all the 2-year-old 8 points. Like, so it's hard to manage, and people have different opinions, and to actually, I think it's so much maybe time, effort, and money to really make Pennsylvania a big buck hunting state. Like, I don't think it can be done unless, like, I feel like a group of people within 2 or 3 square miles got on the same page and managed their private property. They can do it. But like in the forested areas, the rugged mountains and stuff like that, the cover's there for these deer to get away. The point restriction helped, but I think also the population was so high back in the 90s and that the forest couldn't even sustain all the deer, and they died off pretty good, and the forest was able to come back and produce a lot of cover like up in my area, and like I said, just seeing the bucks that come out of these big tracts of mountainous region. um, there's the cover's there, the food's there, and the population is the herd is balanced pretty good buck to doe ratio. But I think one thing recently for us, we had some mild winters that really helped these deer. There's these deer are healthy, and when you get out of the winter with 2 foot of snow, and the first thing in the spring is not horn growth, it's body fat or recovery for their bodies. And I think now with these milder winters, they're coming out of the winter in better shape, able to, speed up the antler growth because they're not as worn down. So I think that helps a lot. And then once you get, like I said, like we're seeing 115 and 120-inch deer that a lot of guys are passing up because they got, and then that's one good thing about the trail cams and cell cams. You're picking up the 140s. You're like, I'm holding off, so these guys are 115s are getting a green light 120. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's doing well. I don't think it's all because of the point restriction, um, keeping the doe herds in check, the deer herd in check. But I think in some of them areas, like I said, it was like in the 90s or something, guys were burning their doe tags or something because there was no deer. But it wasn't a game commission fault, because I remember when I was 20 some years ago, there was a browse line in the forest up there, I remember living around home and driving up there, and there was no um, like diversity up there because there was nothing. It was a browse line, 5 foot to the ground was brown in like summer. There were just too many deer, and they were. I remember it was fours and sixes, and eight, and then you get into the late '90s, into the 2000s, the population died off, and but they started growing better racks because there was fewer of them. But I think as far as trying to manage the whole state, it's not an easy thing with so many different areas and stuff like that.
But culturally, like, were people when they enacted those antler point restrictions, how did they feel about it when it started, and then how do they feel about it now, like collectively, like what you're seeing?
I see it like different opinions, like, no, that ain't no good. And guys that, because, would travel to the mountains per se, would be happy shooting spikes and fours. It was about getting meat for the freezer or does, and now they had to wait. So there was guys that wouldn't go up there or wouldn't just disagreed with it. And, there's guys that say, oh, that point restriction did good. And I think it was like balancing, their opinions. Half of them didn't like it, half of them liked it. But I don't think it was always that created the bigger deer that we got in these areas.
And now, do you think that people would happily go back to shooting 4 points, or do they think that this
Honestly,
is
I
good?
think it's a new era. I think we were talking about there's probably not many guys left. Like when I started, the old timers with their blaze orange, coveralls, or like the guys that I looked up to as hunters, and they're getting older now, and I think it's a new era of hunters to where they're happy with how it is. You know, um, it's just a new. It's time. Things change as time goes on, to where, yeah, I think, but it's a new group of guys. We don't got the guys saying this anymore. They're just about out of the hunting. And I'm people like I talk to Bo Martonic a lot. People get on him for showing the bucks, or we show our bucks that we kill, and guys getting mad. You shouldn't show that. But honestly, Adam, I go into spots that I've been in that era, the late '90s, 2000, and there's nobody. Like we're losing hunters or guys that are motivated to go and get in the woods. I mean, I remember having the tree lounge. You remember the tree lounge?
Hmm.
I carried it a mile and a half back in the woods. I think it was 30 pounds. I get up in the tree. There's guys walking around. Holy mackerel. Like in boot tracks going back the trail. It's a long hike. I don't know, it was a mile or so. We were there recently. Two guys hiked in there. Two guys, and it was a vast piece of land. I'm like, where there would be vehicles parked, and it's I don't know, but the land's there. People, I don't understand it. Like the complaint about, you're drawing attention, but I think I think a lot of the motivated people who are willing to do whatever it takes aren't there. You know, they
Well, I
want the
think
easy they want the easy thing.
I think that too. I think a lot of people really like fall in love with the mystique, and they might see like what you guys are doing, like showing that mountain stuff, and showing the bucks and all that stuff, and then you like you said, you do a couple, 2 3 dark to darks, and it gets old really quick. And if you're not seeing anything, or if if it just isn't panning out, like it's a lot of work. And you have to, like you said all the time, like you have to love hunting. Like you have to love being out there. You have to want to know like what's over the next ridge. And if you're just doing it because you want a big rack, then you know there's 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 easier, you know, ways to do it. You
Yeah,
spend your
and
3 grand at outfitter and
yeah,
fill your
and
wall.
for me to get the few deer, I'm spending way more. way more. Like even the time I could be making money, but that's not what I want. But even like Bo said, like answers some guys, and says, hey, like these guys that are shooting these deer or me, I like they made sacrifices in life so they could do this. Like yeah, they are getting deer, but it's you know, you maybe if that what's your goal or what's your outcome? How bad do you want it? Like a buddy of mine loves deer hunting, but all spring he wants to go fishing, and summer he wants to go fishing. Well, I'm not fishing. I'm fishing for deer horns, or so it's like it's just how much you put into it is what you're going to get out, and you can't be knocking people that are like even time and money. Like if people, I know how I am, but if people, I told people like I pretty much quit working, like and like there's money that I'm losing every day doing it, but it's like, hey, this is what I'm passionate about because this is um what I like to do. So um yeah, that's where I'm at. And if you just got to be that, make more of an effort if you really want one, make sacrifices. And people say, oh, I got a family, and that. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's, well, maybe it's not possible for you. Maybe then you need to go pay or do, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not easy. I'm not, it's not easy. We spend, I don't know if I could show you how, I mean, there's years I got them with spending a little time in a tree, but we spent a lot of, if you look at all the hours I put in throughout the year just to get, say, two deer, man, it's like, wow, people look like, here's what I did. And they'd be like, well, okay, well, now I understand because you're just seeing the outcome, but you're not seeing studying the maps, driving 2, 3 hours, coming home, spring all summer just to get two or three deer. Then they like, wow, okay, I see now.
Yeah, and that to me is like the I don't want to say like the problem, but from September 15th to, February, there's all these pictures of all these guys on Instagram and everybody's getting a deer and
Yeah,
but there none of that is in the story. I mean, nobody
yeah,
nobody wants to see, and you see it I'm sure by like posting stuff online. Like if you just posted you in a car here walking through the woods, like the engagement or whatever that gets is like, oh, yep, Johnny's out doing Johnny stuff. But when you shoot a deer in a blizzard, 1,000 likes,
yeah,
because it's just that easy. And
yeah,
and that and that's the tough part about it is we fall into this. Well, everybody's shooting big deer, and it's there's a lot that goes into it. And for me, like shooting little deer, there's a lot that goes into that too.
yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
so
it is.
but man, I I'm really happy that I was able to get you on here and to talk some deer hunting because I'll never forget meeting you at the show in Ohio, I think.
Hmm.
And I talked to you for like 5 hours, like the
Yeah,
the whole day. And you're like, are we gonna do this podcast or what? And I was like, oh,
yeah,
you still want to talk after all that? And that's
yeah,
just the kind of person that Johnny is. So if you ever run into him and you got a question, he's certainly someone who will give you everything he has to offer.
yeah,
So I really do appreciate it, John.
yeah. Thanks, Adam.
So with the YouTube stuff, you've got that up and running. Where can people follow along with your hunts and kind of the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm mostly active on Instagram, the Johnny Stewart, but my YouTube channel is out. We started it here probably early fall, couple hunts from last year. I got one from this year, and actually we're putting one out this evening from the past week of gun hunting in PA. And probably going to continue putting out content, whether it's some shorts or some scouting or stuff like that. Um, uh, the Johnny Stewart with my YouTube channel. So yeah, check it out, and hopefully I can help people out. Like going forward as far as some videos I put out for scouting, or I'm probably going to do some more e-scouting for people. I've done a lot in the past, and it helps me when I help other people to. It's it's another learning tool for me when you send me an area that you're hunting and you tell me your experiences there and what you found. So I'm only like learning from you somewhat too, because I don't know it all, and I like seeing other people's opinions. And I've been e-scouting and helping people that way, which everybody's been pretty happy on that. So probably in off season I'll start doing more of that, and I'll probably put some stuff out there, advertise it. So yeah, that's it, Adam.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was good to talk to you, Adam.
Yeah, you as well.